From Francis Drake and Walter Raleigh to David Livingstone and Captain Scott, our tiny island has produced some unbelievably intrepid explorers over the centuries. But who are the modern-day equivalents of those original British trailblazers? Could it be argued they are the travel documentary makers who now grace our TV screens, the likes of David Attenborough, Bruce Parry, Michael Palin and Simon Reeve? I'm very wary of pompously referencing myself to past historical figures, says the latter, who is now one of our leading travel broadcasters. But, yes, in sharing my stories in the modern form with people who watch TV programs, it's similar to the way a 19th-century explorer might have returned home and booked lecture halls to tell people about the wider world. Over the last 20 years, Reeve, now 51, has traveled all across the planet making documentaries for the BBC. With his trademark floppy brown fringe and black and white cotton keffiyeh scarf, he is one of the more adventurous and engaging British TV personalities. Among his best-known series are Equator, Tropic of Capricorn, Tropic of Cancer, and Indian Ocean. His latest, which starts on Sunday, is called Wilderness with Simon Reeve, and sees him visiting 4 of the most remote regions on the planet: the Congo rainforest, the Kalahari Desert, the Pacific Ocean's Coral Triangle, and Patagonia, embedding himself with the people who live there. Although BBC health and safety regulations mean he is rarely exposed to the type of dangers his more famous predecessors had to face, his is an occupation that can at times be very risky. During an endlessly exciting career, he has tiptoed through minefields, witnessed trench warfare in the Caucasus, entered a Honduran prison, contracted malaria and been arrested by the Russian security service. I'm a sensible risk-mitigating telly-presenter, until something goes horribly wrong, and then I'd be another statistic of stupidity, he tells the Daily Express. These are not situations where you press a button and you're magically removed to safety. We're in unpredictable situations. In his latest series, most unpredictable of all was the time he went swimming with whale sharks off the coast of New Guinea, in the Pacific Ocean. Whale sharks are enormous creatures, Reeve explains. They are the size of a small single-decker bus, for goodness sake. But they don't like chomping on human beings, so they should be safe creatures to be in close proximity to. Should be, clearly being the key phrase. Having fed the sharks bucket loads of fish, Reeve's production team then encouraged their man to leap into the water with them. The bloody great creatures were whirling and turning on a dime, and it felt a little bit like being on a skid pan where a bus was doing donuts, Reeve adds. There was a moment where I thought this is not the safest thing to do. Sure enough, one of the sharks collided with Reeve as it turned sharply in the water. It was not, as I thought, soft and rubbery, he recalls. It was like getting hit by a ton of concrete. For the next 6 weeks Reeve sported a nasty scar on his leg. But this shark incident was a mere walk in the park compared with an episode earlier in his career when, at one point, he truly believed his life was over. It was while filming his 2005 series Places That Don't Exist. He was in Mogadishu, the capital of Somalia, in the back of a pickup truck with a dozen, heavily armed, quite stoned, mercenaries and an anti-aircraft gun. Driving through a bombed-out section of the city, his truck arrived at a crossroads at exactly the same time as a second pickup truck from a rival warlord's gang. They stopped, and we stopped. They swung their guns onto us, and we swung our guns onto them, Reeve remembers with a shudder. The guy on the other vehicle had his gun pointed right at our truck. There's a big, bloody barrel on an anti-aircraft gun, and I was looking down it. They were screaming at each other. It was a Mexican standoff with anti-aircraft guns. I was terrified. It's slightly traumatizing just to remember it. Born and brought up in West London, Reeve had an unconventional route into television. As a youngster he had a tense and sometimes violent relationship with his father. After getting into trouble for vandalism, fighting, starting fires and setting off explosives, he underwent counseling for his mental health. At one point he deteriorated so badly that he very nearly committed suicide by leaping off a traffic overpass close to his home. "I stepped back, literally," he remembers. "I was a kid with no idea, no ambition, no hope, no job, no girlfriend. It was tough, and I feel really sorry for that lad." After some invaluable advice from his local job center, he managed to get a job in the post room at a national newspaper. "The door opened for me," he remembers, stressing how luck has played a huge role in his success. From there he graduated into writing books, including, in 1998, an early analysis of Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda, which correctly predicted the terrorist group would later launch attacks on Western targets. By 2003 he had completed his first documentary series. Since then he has visited more than 130 different countries worldwide. He feels his wayward youth helps him empathize with the more unfortunate people who feature on his programs. "I do genuinely care about the people we're meeting," he adds. "I can identify with their situations because of difficult times I've been through, perhaps." Nowadays Reeve lives in Devon, on the edge of Dartmoor, with his wife Anya, a TV camerawoman, and their 12-year-old son Jake. Having spent the latest series camping out in jungles, deserts and tundra, there must surely be times when he hankers after a more luxurious style of travel. Simon Reeve in Judith Chalmers mode, so to speak. He admits he and his production team regularly joke that, one day, they'll dedicate a whole series to luxurious hotels of the world. But until then he can only dream. Once, on returning from a particularly arduous job, Reeve remembers switching on the TV and seeing Michael Portillo presenting a luxury travel program. There he was with, literally, a rose-petal-strewn bath in a luxury Indian hotel with a view looking out over the Taj Mahal. "I thought, oh my God, what am I doing with my choices?" At heart, though, he knows this kind of glossy, fluffy program making would never suit his character. If anything, he runs towards dangerous situations rather than away from them. For example, when Russia invaded Ukraine, he says he felt compelled in a way I've never known to go there and fight for the Ukrainians. "I really felt it so strongly. It was quite scary," he recalls. "It was extra bizarre because I had to remind myself, firstly, I had no proper military training, secondly, I was a middle-aged bloke, and thirdly, I was at that moment laid up in hospital on an antibiotic drip. So it was very wrong in every way. But I had the urge to go, and that sense of the outrage being committed." Politics and social issues have loomed large in many of Reeve's documentaries over the years, environmental issues, too. In the latest series he attempts to understand how some of the world's most remote peoples live in harmony with nature in the wilderness, and how climate change is threatening their way of life. He worries that many people in the developed world fail to acknowledge the dangers of climate change because the impact isn't a dramatic tsunami or an atomic bomb of a scenario. He adds, "It's a drip, drip, drip effect. I understand it can be a difficult thing to get the scale of. By denying our impact on climate change, you're not recognizing our profound capability to transform, to destroy. At the same time, we have the most incredible capability to love and create. The same creature that paints the bloody Sistine Chapel is also definitely capable of wiping out the forests. How could we not be seeing our climate change? What we're witnessing around the planet will dramatically affect the ability of us, our children and our grandchildren to survive." Thanks to his reputation as an environmentalist and his 20 years working in TV, Reeve is one of several British presenters with the chance to fill David Attenborough's shoes when the time comes. "Nobody can replace David Attenborough," he says, clearly uncomfortable with such a suggestion. Attenborough was a giant astride a golden age in TV when there were fewer channels and we could all gather round to watch someone who knows their onions tell us stuff about the world. But now there are more jumped-up types like me, on a multitude of TV channels that most of us can't find because we can't operate the bloody TV units. Nonetheless, with his affable, infectious personality, and his enthusiasm for the subject matter, Reeve would be a worthy contender for the role. I'd be mad to say I wouldn't obviously chew off a limb to have a tiny portion of David Attenborough's cake. "Of course I would," he says, still cautious not to disrespect the great man. "But no one person will fill his shoes. No one person can possibly do that." Wilderness with Simon Reeve starts this Sunday at 9 p.m. on BBC Two and BBC